Ever wonder why some environmentalists meet untimely ends? Could powerful interests be silencing those who speak up for our planet? Number 8. Chico Mendes, the voice of the Amazon. In the quiet evening hours of December 22, 1988, gunshots echoed through the small Brazilian town of Zapuri. Chico Mendes, perhaps Brazil's most famous environmental activist, fell dead on his kitchen floor. Mendes wasn't just any environmentalist. He was a rubber tapper who had organized his fellow workers to stand against the rampant deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. His innovative approach promoted sustainable use of the forest rather than its destruction, earning him international recognition, but also making powerful enemies among local ranchers and land developers. For years before his death, Mendes had received numerous death threats. He even predicted his own murder, telling journalists, "I will not live until Christmas." His prediction came true just days before the holiday when he was shot at point-blank range by cattle rancher Darcy Alves. Though Alves and his father were eventually convicted of the murder, many questions remain about whether more powerful interests were involved. Mendes had successfully lobbied for extractive reserves where traditional forest communities could live and work sustainably, directly challenging the business model of wealthy landowners and multinational corporations. His assassination came just as his influence was growing beyond Brazil's borders, with international environmental organizations embracing his vision. The timing couldn't have been more suspicious. Just weeks before his death, Mendes had traveled to Washington to warn about the environmental devastation occurring in the Amazon. Upon returning home, he received word that his name topped a death list created by local ranchers. Despite requesting police protection, he was left vulnerable on the night of his murder. Number 7. Ken Saro-Wiwa, the poet who challenged Big Oil. How far would an oil company go to protect its interests? In November 1995, Nigeria shocked the world when it executed Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni activists following a trial widely condemned as fraudulent. Saro-Wiwa was a renowned author, television producer, and environmental activist who led the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, MOSOP. His crime? Standing up to Royal Dutch Shell and exposing how oil extraction had devastated his homeland in the Niger Delta. The Ogoni territory had been transformed from a fertile agricultural region into a polluted wasteland. Oil spills contaminated farmland and fishing waters, while gas flaring filled the air with toxic chemicals. When Saro-Wiwa organized massive peaceful protests against these practices in 1993, the Nigerian military responded with brutal force raiding villages, killing hundreds of Ogoni people and arresting Saro-Wiwa. The trial that followed was a mockery of justice. Key witnesses later admitted they had been bribed to testify against Saro-Wiwa. Despite international appeals for clemency, including pressure from world leaders, the Nigerian government hanged Saro-Wiwa and his co-defendants. Documents later revealed that Shell had held secret meetings with Nigeria's military government and had paid salaries to the special forces that terrorized the Ogoni. While Shell denied direct involvement in the executions, the company eventually paid $15,500,000 to settle a legal case brought by the victims' families, without admitting guilt. Saro-Wiwa's last words before his execution became his enduring legacy: "Lord, take my soul, but the struggle continues." Number 6. Berta Cáceres, Honduras' fearless defender of indigenous rights. Who silenced the woman who dared to stop a dam? On March 2, 2016, armed intruders broke into Berta Cáceres' home in La Esperanza, Honduras, and murdered her in her bedroom. Cáceres was no ordinary activist. As the co-founder of the National Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras, COPINH, she had led a successful campaign to pressure the world's largest dam builder to pull out of the Agua Zarca Dam project on the sacred Gualcarque River, a vital water source for the indigenous Lenca people. Her international profile had risen significantly in 2015 when she won the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize. But with recognition came increased danger. In the months before her death, Cassiers had reported 33 death threats linked to her opposition to the dam project. Honduras has the unfortunate distinction of being one of the world's most dangerous countries for environmental activists, with more than 120 killed since 2010. What makes Cassiers' case particularly suspicious was how her murder occurred despite court-ordered government protection that was either absent or complicit on the night of her death. After years of delayed justice, a Honduran court finally convicted 7 men of her murder in 2018, including active and former military officers and employees of Desarrollos Energéticos S.A., DESA, the company building the dam. In 2021, David Castillo, the former head of DESA, was also found guilty of being a co-collaborator in the murder. Yet many believe the true intellectual authors of the crime, those who ordered the killing, remain free. The trial revealed text messages showing company executives discussing the need to take care of the situation regarding Cassiers. International human rights organizations continue to question whether powerful political and business interests beyond the immediate perpetrators orchestrated her assassination. Number 5. Dorothy Stang, the nun who died for the Amazon. Can reading from the Bible stop bullets? Sister Dorothy Stang was about to find out on a remote dirt road in the Brazilian Amazon. On February 12, 2005, the 73-year-old American-born nun faced down 2 hired gunmen. As they approached, she opened her Bible and began reading. They responded with 6 shots, including one at point-blank range to her head. Sister Dorothy had spent decades working with rural farmers in Brazil's Pará state, teaching sustainable farming methods and helping them secure legal rights to land. Her efforts directly challenged the interests of illegal loggers and cattle ranchers who were rapidly clearing the rainforest for profit. The brutality of her murder shocked the world. The killers later testified they had been hired by local ranchers for $25,000 Brazilian reais, about $9,000 at the time. While some of the immediate perpetrators and middlemen were eventually convicted, many observers believe the powerful figures who truly ordered her death escaped justice. What makes her case particularly suspicious was the pattern of threats and intimidation that preceded her murder. Sister Dorothy had been placed on a death list by land speculators and had reported these threats to authorities. Despite this, she received no protection. In fact, just the day before her murder, she had met with Brazil's Human Rights Secretary to discuss the escalating violence in the region. Her death came just as she was making progress in establishing sustainable development reserves, protected areas where traditional communities could live and work while preserving the forest. These reserves threatened the business model of those engaged in illegal deforestation and land grabbing. The Brazilian government responded to international pressure by sending federal troops to the region after her murder. However, the area soon returned to business as usual, with environmental destruction continuing and other activists facing similar threats. Number 4. Dian Fossey, mysterious death of the guerrilla guardian. Who killed the woman who gave her life to save Rwanda's mountain gorillas? On December 26, 1985, the body of renowned primatologist Dian Fossey was discovered in her remote cabin in Rwanda's Virunga Mountains. She had been brutally hacked to death with a machete, her face split in 2. Fossey had dedicated 18 years to studying and protecting the endangered mountain gorillas, establishing the Karasok Research Center and gaining worldwide fame through her book, Gorillas in the Mist. Her intense conservation methods had made her both friends and enemies. The official investigation concluded that poachers seeking revenge for her interference with their activities had murdered Fossey. Yet many aspects of the case remain puzzling. Her cabin had been ransacked, but valuable items were left untouched. The killer had known the layout of her camp and the location of her bedroom. And most strangely, no footprints were found outside despite the muddy conditions. Some suspect Fossey's murder may have been connected to her opposition to conservation tourism, a growing industry that some Rwandan officials saw as economically essential. Fossey believed this tourism was stressing the already endangered gorillas. She had increasingly clashed with government authorities who viewed her as an obstacle to their plans. Another suspicious element was Fosse's diary, which went missing after her death. It reportedly contained detailed information about local poaching operations, possibly including names of individuals connected to government officials. Wayne Maguire, an American graduate student working with Fosse, was convicted in absentia by Rwandan courts, but many researchers and friends believe he was a convenient scapegoat who had already left the country when charged. To this day, no one has served time for her murder, and the truth may have been buried with her in the guerrilla graveyard where she was laid to rest. Number 3. Gonzalo Pizarro, the defender of the Sky Islands. Could protecting Ecuador's cloud forests get you killed? On January 4, 2022, Gonzalo Pizarro was found hanging from a tree near his home in northwestern Ecuador. While officials quickly ruled his death a suicide, his family and fellow environmentalists immediately suspected foul play. Pizarro had been the leading voice against mining operations threatening the unique Sky Island ecosystems of Ecuador's cloud forests, biodiversity hotspots containing countless rare and endemic species. These forests also serve as critical water sources for local communities. In the months before his death, Pizarro had received escalating threats related to his opposition to mining concessions granted to multinational corporations. His activism had successfully delayed several projects and brought unwanted international attention to environmental violations in the region. What makes his death particularly suspicious were the circumstances surrounding it. Family members reported that Pizarro had been in good spirits, actively planning new conservation initiatives. His body reportedly showed signs of beating that seemed inconsistent with suicide. Most tellingly, his phone and notebook containing evidence of environmental violations disappeared after his death. Ecuador has seen increasing violence against environmental defenders in recent years, particularly those opposing extractive industries in its resource-rich forests. The country's precarious economic situation has led governments to expand mining operations, often in ecologically sensitive areas and sometimes without proper consultation with local communities. While investigations continue, Pizarro's case highlights the dangerous reality for environmental activists in regions where natural resources, corporate interests, and weak governmental protections collide. His family continues to demand an independent investigation, believing the truth about his death remains hidden. Number 2. Karen Silkwood, the nuclear whistleblower. How dangerous is it to expose safety violations at a nuclear facility? Karen Silkwood was about to find out on November 13, 1974, as she drove to meet a New York Times reporter with a folder of documents. She never made it to that meeting. Silkwood, a chemical technician at the Karamoji plutonium plant in Oklahoma and a union activist, had been investigating safety violations at the facility. When her car was found crashed into a concrete culvert, the documents she had planned to share were mysteriously missing. The circumstances around her death raised immediate questions. There were skid marks on the road suggesting her car had been forced off the road. Dents and paint scrapes on her vehicle indicated another car may have hit her from behind. And perhaps most suspiciously, the crucial documents about nuclear safety violations were nowhere to be found. Just weeks before her death, Silkwood had testified to the Atomic Energy Commission about safety issues at the plant, including exposure to potentially lethal doses of plutonium. She had herself become contaminated under peculiar circumstances, with plutonium found in her apartment. While Karamoji suggested she had contaminated herself to create a case against the company, Silkwood and her supporters believed she was being deliberately exposed as intimidation. The official investigation ruled her death an accident, suggesting she had fallen asleep at the wheel, possibly under the influence of prescription medications found in her system. However, evidence emerged that the amount of sedatives in her blood could have been from a regular prescribed dose, not enough to cause her to pass out while driving. In 1979, Silkwood's family won a $10,500,000 lawsuit against Karamoji for negligence leading to her plutonium contamination. The company later settled for $1,380,000 while admitting no liability. The Karamagi plant closed the same year as the original verdict. Silkwood's story gained nationwide attention and was later made into an Academy Award-nominated film starring Meryl Streep. Questions about what really happened on that Oklahoma highway continue to haunt her case, as does speculation about what was in those missing documents. Number 1. Paolo Borsellino, the magistrate who challenged environmental crime. Can fighting environmental crimes controlled by the mafia get you killed? On July 19, 1992, a car bomb exploded outside the Palermo apartment building where Italian magistrate Paolo Borsellino was visiting his mother, killing him and 5 police bodyguards. While Borsellino is often remembered primarily for his anti-mafia work, fewer people recognize that much of his final investigations focused on the intersection of organized crime and environmental destruction in Sicily. Borsellino had been uncovering how Cosa Nostra had infiltrated waste management contracts, turning Sicily into an illegal dumping ground for toxic and radioactive waste. The magistrate's investigations threatened to expose not just mafia figures, but also their connections to prominent business leaders and politicians involved in environmental crimes. These ecomafia activities included illegal waste disposal, unauthorized construction in protected areas, and corruption in renewable energy projects. What makes Borsellino's assassination particularly suspicious was its timing. Just 57 days after the similar murder of his colleague and friend Giovanni Falcone. Both were killed as they were making significant breakthroughs in cases that threatened to expose high-level connections between organized crime and the Italian state. In the hours before his death, Borsellino had been working on what colleagues described as his Book of Secrets, a red diary in which he recorded his most sensitive findings. This diary disappeared from the scene of the bombing and has never been found. While several mafia members have been convicted for roles in the bombing, many investigators believe there was state complicity in Borsellino's murder. Former mafia members who became state witnesses have suggested that negotiations between government officials and Cosa Nostra leaders accelerated Borsellino's assassination, as he opposed any deals with the criminal organization. The investigation into his death has been marred by false leads, manipulated testimonies, and what Italian courts have called one of the biggest cover-ups in Italian history. The environmental crimes he was investigating have continued to plague Sicily, with illegal toxic waste dumps causing cancer clusters and contaminating agricultural land across the island. Do these deaths represent isolated incidents or a pattern of silencing environmental defenders? Could protecting our planet really be so threatening to powerful interests? As more activists continue to die under suspicious circumstances around the world each year, when will we start connecting the dots?